Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar. Today's webinar is on from the cloud to the edge, configure anything, manage everything. Having said that, let me quickly introduce myself here. I'm Anugrah Benjamin. I work as a product marketing manager at Chef. And alongside me is Sudarshan Kaushik Kannan. I'll let him introduce himself. Sudarshan.
Hey everybody, I'm Sudarshan Kaushik and I'm part of the Progress's product management team. I'm the product manager for the Chef Infra products and for a couple of other new products that we'll be speaking about today.
Awesome. Now that we are done with the introductions, let's quickly take a look at the agenda for today's webinar. We will first look at infrastructure as code for configuration automation, within which we will see how Chef enables infrastructure as code for configuration automation, followed by compliance as code for security and compliance automation, and then again, Chef's capabilities within this sphere. And we will then take a look at policy as code, which is the Chef approach to automate everything to building the automated enterprise. Post that, we will walk through some of the customer examples, real examples of Chef's capabilities from the cloud to the edge in terms of configuration and compliance and application delivery automation. Uh, we'll then take a look at some of the latest developments we've made within Chef, most important of which is the new Automate HA, the enhanced Automate HA. We'll walk through the capabilities associated with that. And finally, we'll quickly walk through what we are building, the new and exciting things that we are building within Chef, uh, and which is in the form of Chef Courier, which will be our solution for ad hoc job orchestration in the configuration and compliance automation areas. Before we get started, a quick summary of what the title of today's webinar is all about, that is from the cloud to the edge. This representation here demonstrates Chef's capabilities when it comes to configuring and deploying applications and infrastructure securely, making sure that they are compliant with all industrial and organizational regulations, and all of this irrespective of the operating system or the environment or the type of device, from cloud resources to applications at the edge. Chef's capabilities encompasses all of these areas to help build the automated enterprise. That brings us to the first item in today's agenda, that is infrastructure as code for configuration automation. And what exactly is infrastructure as code? We'll take a look at that. But first, let's take a look at some of the pain points associated with traditional configuration management. We all know traditional configuration management is an error-prone, slow, and a poorly communicated process. And this is primarily because of heavy manual intervention associated with configuration management. And because this is a human intensive, labor intensive work, it is prone to a lot of errors, it becomes slow, and the entire software delivery process is delayed as a result of getting that perfect outcome. Secondly, it is quite impossible to scale traditional configuration management to modern infrastructure complexity, given the tens of thousands of applications and devices that IT companies use these days. To maintain consistent configurations or compliance postures at scale becomes enormously challenging. And finally, it is important not just to automate your configurations within your server infrastructure. It is also important to ensure that compliance postures of your fleet are also maintained at all times. And Chef makes it possible by building in compliance audits within its tool set to make sure that the entire process is not as cumbersome as it used to be, given the traditional techniques. And all of these pain points lead to increased operational overhead that results in losing a lot of customers, and that in turn is a lost revenue. And it also opens up a lot of threat vectors that can attack your ecosystem, that is the risk of security breaches and the risk of being out of compliance, and finally loss of credibility as a result of not handling configurations in a secure and compliant way. But here are the key benefits of infrastructure as code. When we say infrastructure as code, quite simply put, it is codifying your infrastructure policies to make sure they are delivered consistently at all times. But that it is to go beyond that simple definition of infrastructure as code. Infrastructure as code allows us to not only develop the kind of configuration policies that we want to see in our IT ecosystems, it also helps us test them before we push them to production. It helps enforce system states irrespective of the kind of updates they are, whether they are planned updates that take place at scheduled intervals, or they are unstructured updates that need to be run on selective group of servers within your network. And even so as to extending the benefits to offer dynamic behavior support, that is allowing systems to understand your server requirements, what the CPU requirements are, what the operating system requirements are, and thereby apply the relevant configurations. And also ephemeral resource management, that is even short-lived resources can be automatically configured to run the desired configurations. And going beyond this is the aspect of compliance and security that infrastructure as code allows us to combine alongside configuration management. And this is by combining regulatory and business security policies in the form of code, as we'll come to see later in the compliance as code section, more details on how compliance as code can facilitate security and compliance automation. All of this adds up to deliver applications and updates and configurations with great velocity, and all the while ensuring that they are secure and compliant and consistent across different operating systems and environments. And finally, a dashboard to visualize all of these changes, from infrastructure automation to compliance automation. So let's say edge automation, all the data combined and presented in a meaningful way in a dashboard, right? And a dashboard that provides an auditable history of all the changes, the what, when, and how of all the changes happening within every single node in your network. And to go a little further about how infrastructure as code is facilitated within Chef, right? Predictability is something that is coded deep into how Chef operates. And this is made possible because configurations are maintained as policies. And these can be integrated into your own CI/CD pipelines, starting from your local workstation where the code is actually written, to the cookbooks, to the actual code that makes changes to your fleet. Every piece of this entire workflow can be automated. And Chef Automate, the central dashboard that we talked about, will then enable you to perform these actions through the interface and monitor your fleet through reports of all the changes that have been rolled out using Chef. A quick summary of Chef's infrastructure management solution. Any summary would be incomplete without mentioning that the phrase policy as code, because that is the fundamental tenet upon which the entire Chef ecosystem works on or thrives on. That is the ability to define configurations and compliance policies as code. That is what the first point, confidence through code, entails. Manage disparate systems as one, which brings me back to my point of Chef being platform agnostic. That is, all types of ecosystems, all types of operating systems, they're all supported, from Windows to Linux to environments like cloud, containers, physical and virtual servers, all of them. Eliminate drift and misconfiguration and therefore minimize vulnerabilities. A really great byproduct of using Chef is that configuration drifts are automatically identified and remediated when we implement Chef's infrastructure automation capabilities. And finally, extreme flexibility. This just goes on to say that Chef can fit into any part of your software development lifecycle. And to quickly put all of the use cases of the infrastructure automation solution, It would begin with consistent configuration, automated drift remediation, to system hardening, hybrid cloud control, continuous delivery pipeline automation, and the ability to operate and thrive in high security and low trust environments. Having said that, let's move on to the next item on our agenda, which is compliance as code for security and compliance automation. Let's look at the pain points just as we looked at the pain points for configuration management, traditional configuration management. One major reason that organizations lack speed and agility is the way that they use traditional approaches. And these have typically left compliance and security reviews until the very last step. And sometimes this leads to a very long development process. And this causes a lot of problems. For example, after development and operations teams are done with software or with setting up environments, they pass them along to the security team for a review process. And this is usually a very late step in the process. And the security teams at this stage have no clue what's in there. And they treat this as a sort of black box. In order to find out about these security vulnerabilities, security teams rely on tools such as scanners. And these scanning tools generate just so much data mixed with a lot of useless data, really, like a lot of false positives. It becomes a huge manual process and a really time-consuming one to identify the real problems from all of these enormous pile of data. And what's worse is failing to define what is correct right at the very beginning, right? This means that the cost of rework becomes very high. By the time we end up finding a security problem within this model, we have already wasted a lot of development, operations, testing, and release engineering teams' time. And finally, we have customers often having environments that aren't perfectly compliant. So what we help do is create exceptional conditions or the ability to manage exceptions, right? With that, a lot of delay can further be avoided. Let's look at some key benefits of compliance as code, so to speak, right? When we translate compliance into code, what we are doing is we are unequivocally expressing the intent of security policies. So the resulting code is not subject to any sort of interpretation, and the results, they speak for themselves. Essentially, by using Chef, excuse me, what we are able to do is shift the security testing to the left of the cycle from the later phases, which are usually very close to production. And by shifting this, what we do is we are able to build and even test these policies even on the developer's workstation. Let's take a look at compliance as code with Chef and just how easy it is to make sure that your compliance and security postures are always maintained at desirable states. The first benefit that compliance as code with Chef can help you achieve is the ability to audit for security, where we have seen customers that have focused on continuous security assessments and by which they are able to easily customize even new CVEs. And auditing for compliance, where customers have paired compliance checks with CIS or DISA stick benchmarks or guidelines and are able to maintain continuous compliance of their system. Testing for configuration, another set of customers that we have seen, the way they use our tools is to verify configuration management results. And this enhances trust on their tools and allows them to complement their static code analysis and their unit testing. To quickly summarize Chef compliance management as an offering, every control, every waiver, and every policy is mapped to international benchmarks. So you know the kind of content you are using, the content is reliable. And once you define your baselines within cookbooks, when you define your waivers and when you define your policies, it becomes easier to run continuous scans and continuously monitor the state of every single node, that is the security and compliance posture of every single node within your network. And every time a vulnerability is identified, it is isolated, and there are remediation cookbooks that we provide, which can immediately help you automatically resolve these issues and bring your nodes to the desired state. And obviously, with the ability to integrate Chef with external dashboards, including Splunk, Kibana, ServiceNow, and our own Chef Automate dashboard, this information can be shared with all the stakeholders associated with the process and ensure that everybody understands and knows the current and the most optimum state of devices in the fleet. To quickly summarize the different use cases that Chef Compliance helps address, we've seen the use case that is audit for security and audit for compliance, and which just expands on to include continuous compliance. That is, we run continuous scans and make sure that the desired state is maintained at all times. And this also extends to regulatory compliance, that is, regulations within healthcare, regulations within privacy, regulations among different industries. Chef allows us to accommodate these regulatory compliances within the myriad cookbooks and compliance content that we have. And also includes government compliance, that is, any governmental regulations or organizational specific regulations are also covered within the scope of Chef's scanning and remediation. And finally, all of this just comes together to accelerate the delivery process, that is not just fast delivery of configurations or of policies, but consistent and secure way of delivering these changes. Let's take a look at Chef Cloud Security Posture Management next. And when we talk about cloud security posture management, it's nothing but maintaining compliance and maintaining security in the cloud, which again makes me go back to the title of this presentation, that is from the cloud to the edge, right? So this is where the cloud security posture management comes in, and the pain points associated with cloud security posture management is one of the biggest pain point is the lack of visibility across cloud infrastructure, especially when organizations use services from multiple cloud vendors. And I mean, it is just a fundamental requirement that compliance and security standards need to be maintained. Organizations need to comply with standards like PCI, GDPR, SOC 2, and so every instance within the organization has its own configuration rule, and it has to adhere to a certain compliance standard. Implementing these manually or even trying to audit each of these regularly could become a huge manual time-consuming task. So given that the modern cloud landscape has all of these security risks that are inherent to such environments, how do we make sure that security incidents are prevented, or security security events or the effect of these incidents are mitigated? So all of these security pain points that we see need to be addressed through some benefits that a cloud security management solution can offer. And if you look at the slide right here, we discuss what these key benefits could be that can help maintain an ideal cloud security posture. The first of which is continuous cloud compliance, that is, implement the right set of compliance policies for your cloud, irrespective of the cloud vendor. The ability to detect misconfigurations and guide as to what is the right remediation measure for each misconfiguration or vulnerability identified, and scheduling audit scans even when there is nobody around, to make sure that the compliance posture is always maintained and vulnerabilities are flagged and notifications are raised immediately. The second of which is the ability to do all of this at multi-dimensional scale. One of the key talking points we hear from customers when we talk about Chef is the ability of Chef to operate at scale. And when we do that with tens of thousands of devices, it is really important that your cloud security posture management solution is able to ensure compliance across these heterogeneous IT assets. and it has the ability to scan across any environment from cloud containers, Kubernetes to all of that. And it complies with security benchmarks, CIS, SOC 2, PCI DSS, and such benchmarks. And the ability to combine all of these information and present them in an insightful way. And we discussed this already, and this slide is just the third point here is just to re-emphasize the importance of a common dashboard, and to make the point that the Chef dashboard includes information from cloud security, a posture management perspective as well. So to summarize briefly, what Chef's cloud security management allows us to do is it offers three key values, all of which we just saw in the previous slide. The continuous cloud compliance, where it allows us to create compliance frameworks using the policy as code approach, which makes it platform agnostic, vendor agnostic, and operating system agnostic. The ability to do that at multidimensional scale, from on-prem cloud to Kubernetes and containers, with unified visibility, with the ability to allow data to be exported and published as reports across different platforms. The use cases that cloud security solution, the Chef's cloud security solution offers includes not only privileged access, that is securing Docker host, but it also basically helps in system hardening, that is to prevent unregulated access, and it also allows securing your Kubernetes control plane, that is your Kubernetes clusters can be validated to check if their configurations are compliant based on organizational compliance requirements. It allows us to identify non-OS configuration issues early by embedding image scanning, and it also allows protection against data exfiltration, or it prevents unregulated access, only allows privileged accounts, and it even raises red flags when there are suspicious networks trying to connect, and then making sure that these vulnerabilities are flagged and remediation measures are taken for them. Having spoken about Chef Cloud Security, now let's come to the aspect of Chef Edge Management, that is the edge part of from cloud to the edge. What Chef does when it comes to edge management is allows us to combine the capabilities of configuration management, compliance management, and application delivery management to deliver an exceptional point of sale device experience or edge device experience, right? So let's look at what the pain points are associated with edge management. The first is the most common one, that is difficulties associated with distributing, securing, and auditing of software, given that they are located in distributed locations, often across different geographies, and sometimes even in areas with limited connectivity, without human intervention. So it becomes all the more difficult to deploy software there and then maintain them, right? Downtimes could be unavoidable. This could be a retail warehouse or a factory where these edge devices might reside, and downtimes in such unpredictable environments are really unplanned and not foreseen beforehand. The lack of IT staff at these locations, and obviously the vulnerability of cyber attack at such locations, and limited visibility across applications given how distributed they are, and how limited connectivity environments they operate out of. So all of these challenges need to be solved through some benefits of an edge management solution, and that is what Chef Edge Management does. And we will see in the later slides a customer example of how Chef has really transformed the edge management requirements of a very popular cafeteria chain in the US. So the key benefits of edge management include reliable and scaled deployments to any device located anywhere. That is because the Chef artifacts are such lightweight and immutable that they can be easily deployed anywhere and reliably, right? The real-time visibility means you always know what these edge devices are operating on, that is the configuration, the compliance posture, and what is the application versions and the nature of these applications that are running on these edge devices. Zero trust distribution and secure application management. That is, it it is the chef compliance capabilities that come into picture when it comes to making sure that these application deployments are secure, and then they are continuously scanned to make sure that they always comply with the desired regulations. And finally, the ability to easily roll back a change reduces application testing cycles. It allows you to increase your productivity and reduce operational overhead by using just a single agent for deployment, monitoring, and service management. And all of this allows you to, as is summarized in this slide, easily manage all dependencies, build, deploy, and maintain applications as code. And even with limited connectivity, the peer-to-peer distribution network ensures that all devices always have the latest and greatest when it comes to application update versions or configuration policies or compliance policies within these edge devices. That is, on the right hand side of this slide, you'll notice how a combination of application deployment automation, configuration management automation, and compliance management automation, all of this combined with Chef's Automate dashboard, facilitates Chef Edge management to operate in even the remotest of locations. Having said that, I will now invite Sudarshan to walk us through the policy as code aspect of Chef and how Chef thrives on this approach.
Thanks a lot, AB, for explaining in detail about how Chef operates from cloud to edge and typically anywhere and for anything. But we will now be going into details of some of the aspects that Anugraha was talking about. To begin with, as he said earlier, predictability is coded deep into how Chef operates. Policy as a code is your gateway into making both configurations and compliances predictable. As dev and ops were in conflict before the advent of the DevOps practices, in today's DevSecOps world, security is having to fight similar battles of moving away from being the impediment to innovation to becoming the enabler or the expeditor instead, where any new update or innovation into your systems causes impact to conflicts into the existing security equilibrium. Today's reality is that security should be the responsibility of everybody in an organization. The older way we handle security in a mainframe or a monolithic technology of where you could have true air gap systems and had to literally gain access to a mainframe and plug in to make necessary modifications. And it was in that reality that Chef Infra came to be, in where configuration automation came to help in ways to make those day-to-day processes automated. Automated in such a way to get better consistency across the teams and across the infrastructure. So essentially, that's exactly the same approach we're talking to solve, approaching security in a new way. So the problem of having so many disparate security and compliance systems and tools, our suggested better way is through Chef Inspect, which is the language that lets organizations codify these concerns in a discrete and an actionable way so that all stakeholders have the same source of truth, whether or not things are in compliance. Chef Inspect translates things in a way that can be easily remediated by Chef Infra, our primary configuration tool. So there is a good one-to-one relationship between what the security compliance issues you are uncovering and the tools you use to fix them. Using policy as a code approach, where policies are managed with other application assets as a part of your regular software development lifecycle approach, including versioning, check-ins, CI/CD, etc. These policies are human readable, which facilitates collaboration and eliminates massive spreadsheets or other manual ways of tracking policy. Collaboration is optimized across all these key disciplines: application development, IT ops, security, and compliance. And these are machine enforceable so that the configuration, the auditing, and the remediation can all be automated. Essentially, having a common language shared among your teams, that language is really the codification of security and compliance, where stakeholders, from the folks who care directly about your security and compliance, or those that need to understand what's being codified in order to certify compliance. Managing security and compliance as code is the only way you will enable your organization to have continuous compliance. The benefit of that code or managing compliance and security as code is you have a common language that is human readable, so it is easy to collaborate. You have a single system that is consistent, repeatable, and reliant, so it's easy for you to scale. This is the most interesting part where you are able to shift your security testing left from the end of the process to as far in the left as in the development cycle as possible. The ability to continuously monitor the status of your security and compliance. Ultimately, driving security and compliance through code into your continuous compliance state, where security no longer is a barrier but an enabler of speed. Now, Chef as a tool is ubiquitous in usage among many of our customers, and this includes implementations of different varieties. Whether you want to manage on-prem installations or over public cloud or in the edge, Chef can be the one tool to rule them all. Let us look at some of the examples based on how some customers are utilizing Chef. The first example is a company that most of us recognize. It's Facebook. Now, what was Facebook's situation? It's hard to maintain usability and effectiveness of an aging system with many individual clusters with over 100,000 nodes in size, a slew of different constantly changing system configurations that was becoming increasingly complex. This was Facebook's situation. Facebook built a system based on Chef for systems configuration management that allowed consistent delivery of configurations at an enormous scale. With Chef, Facebook now had an extremely flexible system that allowed a tiny team to manage an incredibly large number of systems with a variety of unique configuration needs. This saw enormous success in three primary areas. Chef provided a very massive scale, so this increased the number of servers that they managed. Chef is platform agnostic by design, so that meant it was easier to manage huge volumes of different configurations across a variety of systems. And last, Chef provided a secure and fast way of automation. So that meant there was a reduction in the number of people required to maintain those configurations. The next use case is of Schuberg Philis. This is an interesting, innovative business technology company. They focus on the mission critical applications that their customers and society rely on 24/7. Schuberg Philis uses Chef to automate the mission critical landscape of their customers. It's also an important part of their audit policy. Chef helps Schuberg Philis successfully pass these audits with complex requirements from government bodies and other compliance regulations, and therefore enables their customers to release their products to market faster. The next example is about a combination of scale and different platforms. So SAP is a large organization of over 100,000 employees across multiple board areas. They use a lot of public cloud naturally, and it dominates across organizations from platforms to products to services. SAP had one of the biggest challenges of scale and growth rate. With over 9,500 cloud accounts and over 30 million cloud resources deployed across AWS, Azure, GCP, and Ali Cloud, SAP had doubled its use of public cloud each year for the past 3 years. SAP uses Chef compliance to scan over 11 million cloud resources across multiple cloud providers like AWS, Azure, and GCP. All this in under 3 hours. So we spoke about scale, we spoke about cloud. Now we want to speak about the edge. Panera Bread is a classic example of using Chef's application delivery tool, Habitat, to achieve tremendous scale with accuracy. Over time, Panera had accumulated multiple tools to deploy, maintain, and upgrade applications in their hundreds and thousands of point of sale machines spread across multiple geographical locations. Panera adopted Chef Habitat to streamline this process and improve their application deployment quality and frequency. Applications packaged with Habitat are lightweight, portable, and immutable. Hence, they were less prone to error and download or runtime failures. They were able to roll back a change quickly with minimal to no manual intervention if the application deployment was wrong. Hence, they could perform day-to-day operations without impacting the customers. So we spoke about some of the use cases and examples of what we have, but we also wanted to take a moment to talk about one of our recent releases, the Chef Automate HA. What is Chef Automate today? Chef Automate can enable you see meaningful dashboards for different product lines, view the current state of the fleet and policy objects, can take actions to filter and search across different dashboard views, help you derive meaningful insights, and know about the log of changes on the system. Chef Automate, when deployed in a highly available mode, is called Automate HA. It is a forward-looking HA solution available to all customers who are entitled to automate. It can be deployed on-prem as well as on cloud, like AWS. One can either manage their own databases or use Chef-managed databases. Automate HA as a solution can be used to have high uptime for critical systems. In case of failure, the system can be brought back to a stable state with limited downtime by manual effort. The solution is highly available and has been tested for scalability of up to 100,000 nodes. This has been documented in the performance benchmarks of our documentation. It is a technical solution and requires a bit of technical prowess. However, there are self-servable docs that are available for you, and if required, you can avail the professional services help to get started with getting using Chef Automate HA. What are the key improvements of Automate HA from Chef Automate 4.10 in general? An interactive CLI utility is available which can help generate deployment configurations. A validation and verification utility are available which can be used to ensure that a stable system is deployed and also to check health of a running system. The Automate HA cluster can be managed from a central Bastion system. One need not go into different systems to study the current state or modify them. From within the CLI of a central Bastion system, the entire cluster can be managed and controlled. There is a capability to increase or decrease the number of systems based on load, but it is not auto-scaling in nature at present. We understand that some customers have been utilizing Chef backend in their implementations of Chef Automate already. Existing private instances of supermarket can be linked to the Automate HA cluster to help in seamless migration from Chef backend. Performance of Automate HA cluster is at par with all the older HA solutions from Chef backend to other solutions that we were talking about. A cluster of Automate HA has front-end nodes and back-end nodes along with load balancers and Bastion systems. A minimum number of nodes is 5 and recommended number of nodes is 11. In front-end nodes, Chef Automate and Infra Server are installed. In the back-end nodes, you have your PostgreSQL, open source databases that are being installed. There are different types of deployment configurations on Automate HA that are available to you. When it comes to on-prem, you can either go with Chef managed database or you can go with a customer managed database where you are managing the Postgres and operating system nodes. Um, there can also be an AWS deployment where the databases are managed by Chef in the deployment, or it can be managed by AWS where the Postgres and operating system nodes are managed by AWS. On on-prem deployment, one needs to provision their own infrastructure and then install the front-end and back-end nodes according to their deployment type. In AWS deployment, there are utilities to provision and deploy on AWS infrastructure. Okay, with that, we go into what's up in the future. We are excited to talk about some upcoming capabilities that we are working on. We are bringing a new product to our list of offerings called Chef Courier. This is a tool we believe will help you perform any complex orchestrations in a simple manner. So, Courier is Progress Chef's new tool to enable you to perform complex job orchestrations by giving you control over three distinctive dimensions of performing actions. The first dimension being the when. Do you want to run immediately? Do you want to run it at a later point of time? Do you want to have the action performed on a schedule in a recurring manner, or do you want to have a recurring schedule with exceptions included? The second dimension being the where. Do you want to perform the action on a particular node or a set of nodes? Or do you want to perform it on a group of nodes? Or do you want to roll out the change in a staggered manner? For example, perform an action on staging database nodes and then move on to production nodes. The last dimension is the how. This is a composite dimension. This is where you define what workload you want to deploy along with the manner of executing the payload for it. This can be heterogeneous in nature. Do you want to perform a cookbook run, a compliance scan, or an operating system command? Or do you want to do all of these in a chained manner? So in essence, you can use Courier to perform actions on your fleet whenever, wherever, and however. Some of the use cases of Courier being utilized for the three dimensions we spoke about now are around very common everyday patterns and for ad hoc one-off situations too. This could be as simple as I want to change the roles for certain users on Windows nodes only in my production environment now. Or a little more advanced as making a patch on a specific set of nodes matching very specific search criteria. Or think of scheduling as something as simple as creating an event on your calendar application. Do you want to perform a restart of certain nodes immediately or create a recurring action like closing opened ports every night? Or make it as complex as performing backup options on database nodes on the first day of every month, excepting the first day of November. You can also control the manner in which the actions are performed. You can make complex orchestrations like perform the operating system patch without exceeding a certain amount of memory usage, or mark a job as failed after retrying twice only. It's also easy to say if you want the job to be performed on all the nodes at the same time or sequentially or one by one or as batches in specific sizes. You can also make Courier very specific to your compliance needs for bespoke orchestrations. Imagine a situation where you want to run a compliance scan against nodes containing specific Java versions alone and then perform a remediation based on failure in specific profile controls. You can also use heterogeneous workloads in a single job if required. There can be situations where you will have to perform an operating system command, then a compliance or a remediation along with cookbook runs. You can do that easily with Courier now. Chef Courier will be made available through Chef Node Management. This is a single pane of glass view for managing everything related to Chef on your nodes and more. This will offer you a simple dashboard to manage nodes under Chef management the versions of Chef agents installed on them. This way, you can easily bring new nodes under Chef management through a few clicks. You can also manage what versions of Chef tools like Courier, Infra, Inspect, or Habitat on any node of your fleet. Over to you, Anugraha.
Thank you, Sudarshan, for that presentation. So that brings us to the last item today, that is the Q&A. And I see there are a few questions that have come through the chat panel. I'm just going to read a few of them, and maybe Sudarshan, you can take the time to answer them. The first question.
Anugraha, I think we have very few minutes left. Maybe we cannot address all of these questions, but we can answer them through emails post the webinar if we are not able to attend to your questions now.
Right. Let's do that. So the first question here is, what is the maximum scale Automate HA can support?
Okay, thanks for bringing that question up. HA is designed to handle implementations of very large scale. We have customers using it in environments containing hundreds and thousands of nodes. We have made available exhaustive set of configurations that help you control the tuning of your cluster for your number of nodes. How do we measure the performance of a HA? So we measure using the number of client runs per minute. To give you an idea, somewhere around 30,000 nodes had 500 client runs per minute were achieved using 2 front-end servers and 3 back-end servers. I encourage you, the person who asked this question, to go check out our docs.chef.io page. We have a dedicated page to talk about the performance benchmarks and how to measure Automate HA.
Awesome. The next question here is, will Courier work along with my existing infra cookbooks or compliance profiles?
Yes, Courier is designed to start working along with your existing Chef setup from the word go. Courier will augment with your existing workflows to make orchestrations happen in the way you want to happen.
Do you want to take one more, Sudarshan, before we call it a day?
Yes, please.
It says, what cloud platforms do you support?
Okay, so that's a little bit of an ambiguous question, so I'm going to try to decode that. Chef can help you manage and do compliance checks on most of the popular cloud platforms like AWS, Azure, GCP, and Ali Cloud, etc. If you have any specific platform that you want us to answer about, please type in the chat box and we can answer that.
Awesome. There are a few more questions, but I think we'll probably call it a day now and answer those questions via email. I'd like to take the last few minutes to thank all the attendees that joined us today. We'll share the webinar recording with everybody, and all the unanswered questions will also be answered via email. Thanks everybody for joining today's webinar. See you again soon. Have a good day, everybody.